Have you ever been looked at like you didn't belong in a room you actually paid for? Now, imagine that room is a $75 million private jet, and the people blocking the door are the ones you pay to open it. Today's story is a masterclass in Don't Judge a Book by its cover, featuring Vivian Sterling, a tech mogul who showed up to her own flight in a hoodie and was treated like a trespasser by her new crew. But this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. What the pilot was hiding in the cargo hold turned a moment of disrespect into a federal crime scene. Stick around, because the karma in this story doesn't just bite, it devours. The rain at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey was relentless, a cold, biting drizzle that turned the tarmac into a slick mirror of grey slate. Inside the private terminal of Signature Flight Support, the air smelled of expensive espresso and leather polish. It was a world of hushed tones and frantic wealth, where billionaires tried to look bored and their assistants tried not to look terrified. Vivian Sterling pulled the hood of her oversized vintage college sweatshirt up over her natural curls. She was tired. Not the kind of tired a good night's sleep fixes, but the bone-deep exhaustion of closing a $3 billion acquisition of a biopharmaceutical competitor in Zurich over a 48-hour Zoom marathon. She hadn't slept in 2 days. She hadn't showered in 24 hours. She was wearing joggers that had seen better days and a pair of worn-out sneakers. To the untrained eye, she looked like someone who had taken a wrong turn at the bus stop. To the trained eye, the platinum Patek Philippe Nautilus peeking out from her sleeve, worth more than a suburban house, might have been a clue. But nobody at Teterboro was looking that closely today. She walked toward the glass doors leading to the ramp, her phone pressed to her ear. "Julian, I don't care about the board's hesitation regarding the merger," Vivian said, her voice low but carrying that distinct, sharp cadence of someone used to being obeyed. "Tell them if they vote no, I liquidate my position by Monday morning. They know I'll do it." She hung up, sliding the phone into her pocket. She just wanted to get on her plane, sleep for 6 hours and wake up in London. Through the rain-streaked glass, she saw it. Her pride and joy. The Bombardier Global 7500, tail number N750VS. It was a beast of a machine, capable of flying non-stop from New York to Hong Kong, featuring a master suite with a permanent bed and a stand-up shower. She had bought it 6 months ago, customized the interior with Hermes leather and rare mahogany, and she barely got to use it. She pushed through the glass doors, the cold wind whipping her face immediately. A young man in a yellow vest from the ground crew looked up, startled. "Ma'am, you can't be out here," he shouted over the roar of a nearby Gulfstream G650, taxing out. "It's fine." Vivian waved him off, keeping her head down against the wind. "I'm heading to the Global, N750VS. The ground crew guy hesitated. He scanned her attire, the baggy sweats, the lack of luggage. "Ma'am, that's a private charter. The crew is prepping for the owner. You need to go back inside and wait for your escort if you're catering or cleaning." Vivian stopped. She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. This again. It happened at high-end boutiques. It happened at board meetings before she was introduced. And now, it was happening at her own hangar. "I'm not catering," she said, her voice flat. "I'm the passenger." The boy looked skeptical, but shrugged. "Okay. But if Captain Hayes throws a fit, that's on you. He's been screaming at the fuel truck guys all morning. A real piece of work, that one." Captain Hayes. Vivian frowned. That was a new name. Her usual pilot, Captain Miller, was on paternity leave. The management company, Apex Jet Aviation, had sent a relief crew. She hadn't met them yet. She had requested top-tier professionals because this flight was crucial for her rest. She walked across the wet tarmac, her sneakers squelching. As she approached the massive aircraft, the air stairs were down. The warm glow of the cabin lights spilled out onto the wet concrete, looking inviting. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was a woman who looked like she had been cut out of a 1960s Pan Am magazine and pasted into the modern world. Tiffany. Her blonde hair was in an immaculate, tight bun. Her red lipstick was razor sharp, and her uniform was tailored within an inch of its life. She was scrolling on her phone, looking bored. When Vivian stepped into the circle of light, Tiffany didn't even look up. "Deliveries go to the other side. The cargo hold is open. Just throw the bags in and don't scratch the paint," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with disdain. Vivian paused, one foot on the bottom step. "Good evening to you too." Tiffany finally looked up. Her eyes raked over Vivian's wet hoodie and sweatpants. The sneer that formed on her face was almost impressive in its speed. "Excuse me?" Tiffany said. "You can't come up here. This is a private aircraft. Security." She looked around for the ground crew. "Who let this woman onto the ramp?" "I'm boarding," Vivian said, taking another step up. "My name is Vivian Sterling. I believe you're expecting me." Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound. "Sterling. Honey, the manifest says, Dr. V. Sterling. The owner of this jet is a billionaire tech CEO. You look like you're here to ask for spare change or sell me a mixtape." Vivian tightened her grip on the handrail. "I am Dr. Sterling, and if you don't move, you're going to be Dr. Unemployed." Tiffany crossed her arms, blocking the stairs physically. "Listen to me, you delusional trespasser. I have worked for royalty. I have flown with pop stars. I know what money looks like. Money does not look like that." She gestured vaguely at Vivian's entire existence. "Now get off these stairs before I call the police and have you dragged off." The wind howled, but the silence between them was louder. Vivian stared at the flight attendant. She wasn't angry anymore. She was fascinated. It was a dangerous kind of fascination. "Is there a problem here, Tiffany?" A deep, booming voice came from the top of the stairs. A man stepped out of the cabin. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of jawline that suggested he spent more time looking in the mirror than looking at flight charts. He wore a pilot's uniform with 4 gold bars on the epaulets. Captain Preston Hayes. "Captain," Tiffany said, her voice instantly switching to a sugary whine. "This woman is refusing to leave. She claims she's the owner." Hayes looked down the stairs. He looked at Vivian like she was a bug on his windshield. "Is that so?" Hayes said, descending 1 step. He towered over her. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. The owner is arriving in 20 minutes. We need the cabin pristine. Your wet shoes are soiling the carpet runner. Leave. Now." "I arrived 20 minutes early," Vivian said, her voice ice cold, "because I own the plane, and I can arrive whenever I want. Now get out of my way, Captain Hayes. I want a gin and tonic, and I want to take off." Hayes chuckled. He actually chuckled. "Look, I don't know how you got past the gate, but you're not getting on my jet. I don't fly junkies, and I don't fly liars. Get lost." He reached out and physically shoved her shoulder. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to make her stumble back onto the wet tarmac. Vivian caught her balance. The rain plastered her hair to her forehead. She looked up at the two of them, the sneering stewardess and the arrogant captain, looming over her from the dry safety of the aircraft she paid for. "You touched me," Vivian said softly. "I'll do more than touch you if you don't scram," Hayes threatened. "I'm calling the cops." "No," Vivian said, pulling her phone out again. "Don't bother. I'll make a call first." Vivian didn't retreat to the terminal. She stood right there in the rain, the engines of a nearby Citation Latitude whining as it prepared for departure. The water soaked through her hoodie, chilling her skin, but the rage burning in her chest kept her warm. She dialed a number she had saved under Emergency Aviation. It rang once. "Ms. Sterling, is everything all right?" The voice belonged to Julian Cross, the CEO of Apex Jet Aviation. He was the man responsible for managing her aircraft, hiring the crew, and ensuring her life was seamless. He answered her calls on the first ring, no matter the time zone. "Julian," Vivian said, her eyes locked on Captain Hayes, who was now leaning against the doorframe of the jet, smirking as he watched her in the rain. Tiffany had gone back inside, presumably to check her makeup. "Who is crewing my aircraft today?" Julian hesitated. That would be Captain Preston Hayes and a flight attendant named Tiffany Clark. Captain Miller is on leave, as you know. Hayes comes highly recommended. He used to fly for the royal family of, well, a very prominent European family. Is there an issue? Are they late?" "They are not late," Vivian said. "They are currently blocking the air stairs. Captain Hayes just shoved me off the steps of my own plane because he thinks I look like a junkie and a trespasser. Tiffany told me to go load the cargo." There was a silence on the other end of the line, so profound it felt like the phone had died. He did what?" Julian's voice cracked. "I'm standing in the rain, Julian, at Teterboro, looking at my $75 million asset, which is currently being held hostage by 2 people you hired. I want you to fix this, now." "Ms. Sterling, I am so sorry. I can't believe. Please, hand the phone to Captain Hayes. Immediately." Vivian lowered the phone. She didn't walk up the stairs this time. She just raised her voice slightly, projecting over the wind. "Hayes." The pilot looked down, rolling his eyes. "Still here?" "Police are on the way, sweetheart." "Phone," Vivian said, holding it up. "It's for you." Hayes laughed. "Who is it? Your dealer?" "It's Julian Cross, your boss." The smirk didn't vanish instantly. It faded slowly, replaced by a look of confusion. Hayes hesitated. He looked at the phone, then at Vivian. The confidence in his posture wavered just a fraction. He walked down the stairs, slowly this time, wary. He snatched the phone from her hand, careful not to touch her skin, as if she were contagious. "This is Captain Hayes," he barked into the phone, maintaining his bravado. "Who is this?" Vivian watched his face. It was a masterpiece of transformation. First, the color drained from his cheeks. Then, his eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Vivian, then back at the ground, then at the plane. "Mr. Cross, Sir, she's wearing a hoodie. She looks like—" Hayes stammered. "Sir, with all due respect, protocol dictates we secure the—" "Yes, sir." "No, I didn't. I pushed her back, for safety. Sir." Hayes pulled the phone away from his ear. He looked like he had just swallowed a lemon whole. He held the phone back, out to Vivian. His hand was trembling slightly. Vivian took the phone. "Julian." "Vivian." Julian sounded breathless. "I have fired them. Both of them. Effective immediately. They are to collect their personal effects and vacate the aircraft. I am calling the local police to escort them off the tarmac if they resist. I am also mobilizing a standby crew from Teterboro. They can be there in 45 minutes. Please accept my deepest apologies." 45 minutes is too long, Julian," Vivian said calmly. "I'm tired. I want to leave." "I understand, but I have a backup plan. I always do. Just clear the paperwork. I'm handling the rest." She hung up. Vivian pocketed the phone and looked at Hayes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pale, sweaty panic. "Ms. Sterling," Hayes started, his voice jumping an octave. You have to understand, in this industry, security is paramount. We get people trying to sneak on planes all the time. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with decency?" Vivian finished for him. "Is that the defense you want to go with, Captain?" Tiffany appeared at the door of the plane, holding a bottle of champagne. "Preston, who was on the phone? Is the owner here yet?" Hayes looked up at her, defeated. "She is the owner, Tiffany." Tiffany froze. She looked at Vivian, then at the hoodie, then at the plane. The glass of champagne in her hand tilted dangerously. "Her? But she's black," Vivian suggested. "Young, wearing sweats." "You're fired," Hayes muttered, staring at his shoes. "We both are. Cross just terminated the contract." "Fired!" Tiffany shrieked. "He can't fire us. We're union. I have rights. You can't fire me just because you decided to play undercover boss and trick us." Vivian finally walked up the stairs. She moved past Hayes, who shrank back to let her pass. She stopped in front of Tiffany. Up close, she could see the cracks in Tiffany's foundation. "I didn't trick you," Vivian said. "I just showed up. You did the rest." "Get your things," Vivian commanded, stepping into the cabin. "You have 5 minutes before I have security throw you out the same way you tried to throw me out." She walked into the main cabin of the Global 7500. It was beautiful. The cream leather seats, the walnut trim. But something felt off. The air inside the cabin felt heavy. Vivian didn't sit down. She walked past the main seating area toward the rear stateroom. She needed to check something. She had an intuition, a survival instinct that had served her well in the shark tank of the tech industry. Hayes and Tiffany were arguing loudly outside on the stairs, blaming each other. Vivian reached the back of the plane. She opened the door to the rear baggage compartment, which was accessible from the cabin in the Global 7500. She expected to see her empty luggage space, ready for the bags she didn't bring. Instead, she saw boxes. Lots of them. They were nondescript brown cardboard boxes, stacked neatly against the bulkhead, strapped down with cargo netting. There were at least 20 of them. Vivian frowned. She hadn't ordered anything, and this crew had just arrived from Miami to pick her up. She stepped closer. The label on one of the boxes had been partially ripped off, but she could read the shipping manifesto attached to the side. It wasn't addressed to her. It wasn't addressed to anyone she knew. The recipient was listed as Viper Logistics, Moscow. And under the contents description, it didn't say aircraft supplies. It said precision optics, fragile. Vivian's heart stopped. She knew what precision optics meant in the world of grey market exports. It usually meant thermal sights for rifles or guidance chips for drones. She wasn't just dealing with a racist crew. She was standing on a plane that was being used as a mule for high-tech smuggling. Suddenly, the argument outside stopped. Footsteps thumped heavily on the stairs. They were coming back up. "Ms. Sterling?" Hayes's voice called out from the front of the cabin. It wasn't the apologetic voice from 2 minutes ago. It was hard. Desperate. "Ms. Sterling, we need to talk. Don't go in the back." Vivian looked at the boxes. She looked at the heavy steel door of the baggage hold. She realized with a jolt of pure adrenaline that she was trapped in a metal tube with 2 people who had nothing left to lose. The first sound Vivian heard wasn't a voice. It was the mechanical whine of the hydraulic system. Whir thump. The air stairs were retracting. Vivian stood in the narrow corridor connecting the baggage hold to the aft lavatory, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Hayes wasn't just coming back on board to talk. He was sealing the aircraft. He was trapping her inside with him, Tiffany, and 20 crates of illegal military-grade optics destined for a sanctioned nation. She stepped back from the cargo hold and quietly clicked the baggage door shut. It wouldn't lock from this side, but it would buy her seconds. "Ms. Sterling," Hayes's voice boomed through the cabin. Closer now. He was in the main seating area. "I know you're back there. We need to have a conversation about privacy." Vivian didn't answer. She moved. The Bombardier Global 7500 is one of the largest purpose-built business jets in the world. It is designed for comfort, not for tactical warfare. However, Vivian had customized the layout. Between the main club suite and the aft stateroom, she had installed a solid mahogany divider with a heavy, soundproof pocket door. She slipped into the stateroom, her private bedroom, and slid the heavy door shut. She turned the thumb lock. It was a privacy lock, meant to keep out flight attendants during a nap, not to stop a desperate man, but it was solid. "Open the door, Vivian!" Hayes shouted. He pounded on the wood. The veneer shuddered, but the latch held. "You're making a mistake, Preston," Vivian said, her voice trembling slightly but clear. She pressed her back against the door, checking her surroundings. "The police are already on their way. Julian called them. You're just adding kidnapping to your list of problems." "Julian called airport security to escort us off," Hayes yelled through the door. "He didn't call the feds. But if you saw what I think you saw in the back, and you open your mouth, my life is over. I'm not going to prison because some entitled tech princess decided to snoop." "Preston, stop!" Tiffany's voice came from the main cabin. She sounded hysterical. "We can't keep her here. The ground crew saw her board. They know she's on the plane." "Shut up, Tiffany," Hayes roared. "Go to the cockpit. Start the APU. We need power to the systems. We're taxiing." "Taxiing?" Tiffany screamed. "To where? We can't take off without clearance. We'll be shot down." "We're not taking off," Hayes hissed. "We're moving to the de-icing pad on the far side of the field, away from the terminal. We're going to offload the cargo into the van that's waiting, and then we're going to figure out what to do with her." Vivian's blood ran cold. If they moved the plane to a secluded part of the airport, her chances of survival dropped to 0. She needed to disable the aircraft. She looked around the stateroom. A bed, a TV, a wardrobe, and the en-suite bathroom. She rushed into the bathroom. It was stocked with luxury toiletries, useless. But then her eyes landed on the emergency equipment panel near the floor. Every compartment had one. She popped the latch. Inside, a life vest, a smoke hood, a fire extinguisher, and a crash axe. Vivian grabbed the crash axe. It was heavy, with a rubberized grip and a sharp, red-painted steel head. It was designed to cut through fuselage aluminum in a crash. It would definitely cut through a mahogany door, or a pilot. But she didn't want to fight Hayes. She wanted to stop the plane from moving. She felt the subtle vibration of the auxiliary power unit, APU, spooling up. The lights in the cabin flickered and then steadied. The air conditioning hummed to life. Hayes was powering up the avionics. Vivian pulled her phone out. No signal. The fuselage of a jet is essentially a Faraday cage, and while the plane had Wi-Fi, the router needed to be activated from the cockpit, which Hayes controlled. She was cut off. Wait, the SATCOM handset. Most private jets have a satellite phone system hardwired into the aircraft, independent of the pilot's cell phone. There was a handset in the armrest of the VIP seat in the bedroom. Vivian dove for the seat and flipped the armrest open. There it was, a sleek, corded handset. She lifted it, a dial tone. The system was live because the APU was running. Hayes had turned on the power to move the plane, inadvertently giving her a lifeline. She didn't call 911. 911 would route to a local dispatcher who would waste time asking for her address. She dialed a number she had memorized years ago, a direct line to a contact at the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, a man she had consulted with on cybersecurity contracts for her tech firm. "Agent Miller," the voice answered. "David, it's Vivian Sterling," she whispered, her eyes glued to the door handle which was starting to rattle. "I am on my private jet at Teterboro Airport, tail number November 750 Victor Sierra. I am being held hostage by my crew. There are weapons or military optics in the cargo hold destined for Moscow. The pilot is attempting to taxi the aircraft to a remote area. I am locked in the aft cabin." There was a pause. No questions. No, "Are you sure?" Just the instant shift in tone that happens when a professional enters crisis mode. "Vivian, keep the line open. Do not hang up. Is the aircraft moving yet?" "Not yet. But the engines are—" The plane lurched. The main engines hadn't started, but the plane was moving. Hayes was using the residual thrust or a tow. No, he had started the right engine. She could hear the high-pitched whine of the Rolls-Royce Pearl engine spooling up. "He's starting the engines," Vivian said, panic rising. "Okay, listen to me. We have assets at Teterboro. Customs and Border Protection has a presence there. I am patching into the tower now. We will stop that plane. Do you have a weapon?" "I have a crash axe." "Good. Stay in the secure room. If he breaches that door, you do what you have to do. We are coming." Bam! The bedroom door shook violently. A hairline crack appeared in the wood near the lock. Hayes was kicking it. "I know you're on the phone, Vivian," Hayes screamed. "I can see the SATCOM line is active on the cockpit display. Hang it up!" He knew. The cockpit avionics showed the status of all cabin systems. "He knows I'm calling," Vivian whispered to Agent Miller. "Let him know," Miller said calmly. "Tell him it's over. Tell him the tower has already revoked his clearance." Vivian put the phone to her chest. "Hayes, I'm talking to Homeland Security. The tower knows. If you move this jet 1 inch, they will treat it as a hijacking. You know what the intercept protocol is." The kicking stopped. Silence. Then the engine noise spooled down. The whine faded. For a second, Vivian thought she had won. Then she heard the hiss of the cabin pressure equalization valve and a terrifyingly calm voice from the other side of the door. "If I'm going down," Hayes said, his voice low and muffled, "I'm not going down for smuggling. I'm going down for a tragic accident. Fire on board. Smoke in the cabin. No survivors." Vivian smelled it instantly. The acrid, chemical stench of burning fabric. He wasn't trying to break in anymore. He was setting the main cabin on fire. The panic that gripped Vivian wasn't the frantic, flailing kind. It was cold and sharp. It was the clarity of someone who realized that money, influence, and stock options were utterly useless against chemistry. Smoke. In an aircraft, smoke is the deadliest killer. It fills the small volume of air within seconds, choking the lungs long before the flames touch the skin. "David," Vivian said into the phone, coughing as the first wisps of grey smoke curled under the doorframe. "He's setting a fire. The cabin is filling with smoke." "Vivian, listen to me." Agent Miller's voice was urgent now. "Drop the phone. Put on the smoke hood. Now. It's in the emergency kit." Vivian dropped the handset. She scrambled back to the open panel in the bathroom. She grabbed the vacuum-sealed package labeled PBE, Protective Breathing Equipment. She ripped the plastic open. It looked like a bizarre sci-fi helmet, a hood made of heat-resistant captan with a thick rubber neck seal and an oxygen generator at the base. She had watched the safety briefing video a dozen times, bored, sipping champagne. She never thought she'd actually have to wear the damn thing. She pulled the hood over her head. The rubber seal snapped tight around her neck, pulling her hair. She reached behind her neck and pulled the toggle to start the oxygen generator. A hiss of cool air filled the hood. She could breathe. But she couldn't stay here. The smoke was getting thicker, turning from grey to black. The mahogany door was getting hot to the touch. Hayes must have doused the leather seats in the main cabin with high-proof alcohol from the bar or lighter fluid. She grabbed the crash axe again. She couldn't go forward into the fire. She had to go back. The baggage hold. The baggage hold on the Global 7500 had an external cargo door, but it couldn't be opened from the inside during flight. But they weren't in flight, and there was another way out. The emergency overwing exit was in the main cabin, blocked by fire. But inside the baggage hold, there was an access panel to the avionics bay, and sometimes a maintenance hatch. No, that was too complex. She had a simpler option. She moved to the rear wall of the stateroom, which led to the baggage area. She opened the door she had come through earlier. The baggage hold was dark, cold, and smelled of the wet boxes. But it was free of smoke for now. Vivian stepped inside and closed the door behind her, sealing herself in the cargo bay. She was now trapped between the fire in the front and the tail of the plane. She turned on the flashlight on her phone. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the stacks of boxes labeled Viper Logistics. She needed to signal the outside world. She moved to the small, circular porthole window on the emergency exit door of the baggage compartment. She looked out. The scene outside was chaotic. Blue and red lights were strobing against the rain-slicked tarmac. Not just one car, dozens, police cruisers, black SUVs, and a massive yellow airport rescue firefighting, ARFF, truck were screeching toward the plane. They were here, but they couldn't get in. The air stairs were retracted. The plane was a fortress, and Hayes was likely in the cockpit, barricaded behind a reinforced door, watching the world burn. Vivian looked at the cargo door. It was a massive plug-type door. It opened outward and upward. There was a handle on the inside, covered by a plastic guard. Warning, do not open while pressurized. The plane wasn't pressurized. She was on the ground. She smashed the plastic guard with the butt of the crash axe. It shattered. She grabbed the heavy steel handle. It was cold. She cranked it upward. It groaned, the locking pins retracting with a heavy mechanical thud. She pushed. The hydraulic actuators whined, assisting the lift. The massive door swung out and up, letting the freezing rain and the roar of the sirens flood into the compartment. Vivian stood at the edge of the open cargo hold, 10 feet above the tarmac. The fresh air hit her face, clearing the smell of smoke. "Hands up! Let me see your hands!" A voice screamed from below. A spotlight blinded her. Vivian dropped the axe and raised her hands. "I'm the hostage," she screamed against the wind. "I'm Vivian Sterling. The fire is in the main cabin." A tactical team in heavy armor was advancing under the wing. One of them signaled to the others, "Hold fire! Hostage secure!" Then, a ladder truck from the fire department roared up, extending its bucket toward the open cargo door. But before she could step onto the ladder, the door to the baggage hold, the one leading back into the burning cabin, burst open. Hayes stumbled in. He looked deranged. His uniform was singed, his face smeared with soot. He was coughing violently, tears streaming down his face from the smoke. He held a flare gun, part of the survival kit, in his shaking hand. "You don't get to leave," he screamed, his voice raspy. "You ruined it. You ruined everything." He raised the flare gun. It wasn't a lethal weapon at long range, but at point-blank range. It was a fireball. Vivian stood at the edge of the drop. She had nowhere to go. "Preston, look outside!" she yelled, pointing to the army of police surrounding the jet. "It's over. Don't add murder to this." "It was over the minute you walked up those stairs," Hayes shouted. He pulled the trigger. Vivian didn't wait. She didn't think. She threw herself backward, out of the open cargo door, into the void. Falling 10 feet onto concrete isn't like the movies. You don't land in a superhero crouch and sprint away. Vivian hit the ladder bucket that was rising to meet her, but she hit it awkwardly. Her shoulder slammed into the metal railing, and she tumbled into the basket, the wind knocked out of her. A second later, a bright orange streak hissed over her head. The flare Hayes had fired. It sailed out into the rainy night, sizzling on the wet tarmac. "Go, go, go!" Strong hands grabbed her vest. A firefighter in full bunker gear hauled her down into the bottom of the bucket as the operator slammed the controls to retract the boom. "We have the VIP! Clear the zone!" the firefighter yelled into his radio. Vivian gasped for air, clutching her shoulder. The crew, the girl, Tiffany. "We're on it, ma'am. Stay down." As the bucket lowered, Vivian watched her $75 million jet. Thick black smoke was now billowing from the open cargo door and the main cabin vents. The fire Hayes had set to cover his tracks was consuming the interior. Suddenly, the emergency slide at the front of the aircraft deployed with a loud whoosh. Tiffany slid down, tumbling onto the wet concrete. She didn't run. She curled up into a ball on the tarmac, sobbing, her hands over her head. 2 tactical officers moved in on her immediately, zip-tying her hands behind her back. But Hayes didn't come out. The firefighter helped Vivian out of the bucket and onto a stretcher that paramedics had waiting. "I'm fine," she insisted, sitting up. "I'm not going to the hospital until I see him in cuffs." "Ma'am, you inhaled smoke," a paramedic said, trying to put an oxygen mask on her. "I had a hood." She pushed the mask away. "Look." She pointed at the plane. The cockpit window popped open. A rope ladder was thrown out. Captain Hayes was trying to bail out the pilot's emergency exit. He climbed halfway down, dangling like a spider. But the tarmac below him wasn't empty. A black armored truck, a Lenco Bearcat belonging to the New Jersey State Police TEAMS unit, screeched to a halt right under the rope ladder. 3 officers poured out, weapons trained upward. "Drop, now!" Hayes looked down. He looked at the dogs barking, the rifles, the sheer force assembled against him. He let go. He hit the ground hard, rolling in the puddles. Before he could even attempt to stand up, he was pinned. A knee to the back, arms wrenched behind him. Vivian watched from the ambulance bay, wrapped in a shock blanket. The rain was washing the soot off her face. A black SUV with government plates pulled up next to the ambulance. A man in a suit stepped out, flashing a badge. FBI. "Case Sterling?" "Yes." "Special Agent Schroeder, FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Are you injured?" "Just my pride and my shoulder," she said. "Did you get the boxes?" "Fire crews are suppressing the blaze now to save the evidence," the agent said, looking at the smoking plane. "We had Hayes on a watch list for 6 months. We suspected he was moving hardware for a Russian proxy, but we never could catch him with the goods. He usually flies cargo charters into Eastern Europe. We didn't know he had infiltrated Apex Aviation. He used my plane because it has diplomatic immunity level clearance at some airports due to my company's government contracts," Vivian realized aloud. He thought he could hide in plain sight. "Exactly," Schroeder nodded. "And he would have gotten away with it if you hadn't decided to fly commercial. Wait, why did you decide to come to the plane today?" Vivian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I didn't fly commercial. I just wanted to go home, and I wore a hoodie." Schroeder looked confused. "A hoodie?" "He didn't let me on because I didn't look like an owner," Vivian said, watching Hayes being dragged toward a police van. "He thought I was a nobody. If he had just let me board and treated me like a human being, I would have sat in the cabin, drank my wine, and never looked in the cargo hold. He would have delivered his weapons and got paid." The agent stared at her. "So, his racism literally busted his entire operation?" "Karma," Vivian said, shivering. as the adrenaline faded. "It's not just a concept agent, it's a boomerang." She watched as they walked Hayes past the ambulance. He looked up. His eyes met hers. He looked small. The arrogance, the pilot's uniform, the sneer. It was all gone. He looked like exactly what he was, a criminal who had underestimated the wrong woman. Vivian didn't look away. She didn't smile. She just raised her hand, mimicked a phone with her fingers and mouthed, "Call me." Hayes slumped as the officers shoved him into the back of the van. "Ms. Sterling," the paramedic said gently, "we really need to check that shoulder." "1 minute," she said. She looked around for Tiffany. They were loading Tiffany into a separate cruiser. The flight attendant was hysterical, shouting about how she didn't know and just did what she was told. Vivian felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. Tiffany had blocked the stairs. Tiffany had sneered. Complicity is a choice. "Okay," Vivian said to the paramedic. "Take me away. I have a feeling I'm going to need a new plane." The fire on the tarmac of Teterboro Airport was extinguished within an hour, but the firestorm on the internet was just beginning. Vivian spent the night at Hackensack University Medical Center getting her shoulder treated for a deep contusion, and her lungs cleared of smoke particulates. By the time she was discharged the next morning, the world had changed. A ground crew member, the same young man in the yellow vest who had warned her about Captain Hayes, had filmed the entire initial confrontation on his phone. He had started recording the moment Hayes shoved Vivian, sensing that things were about to go south. The video, titled "Tech CEO Denied Boarding Her Own 75 Jet for Wearing a Hoodie," was trending #1 on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. It had 40 million views in 12 hours. The footage was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. "I don't fly junkies, and I don't fly liars. Money does not look like that." Vivian sat in the back of a blacked-out Escalade provided by Apex Jet Aviation, who were currently in full damage control mode, and watched the video on her iPad. She saw herself standing in the rain, looking small but unbreakable. She saw the sneer on Tiffany's face. She saw the physical shove from Hayes. "Ms. Sterling," her PR crisis manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, said from the seat across her, "the press is camped outside your penthouse. Apex has already issued a statement firing the crew and suing them for breach of contract. But everyone wants to hear from you," Oprah called. "The Times wants an exclusive." "No interviews," Vivian said, putting the iPad down. "Not yet. I want the FBI report first." The investigation moved at lightning speed, fueled by the high-profile nature of the victim and the national security implications of the cargo. 3 days later, Special Agent Schroeder sat in Vivian's living room in Manhattan. The room overlooked Central Park, a stark contrast to the cold, wet tarmac where they had met. "It's worse than we thought," Schroeder said, opening a file. "Hayes wasn't just a mule. He was a broker." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Captain Preston Hayes had a gambling debt. Massive. We're talking 7 figures to syndicates in Macau. He was leveraged. He agreed to use his position as a charter pilot for high-net-worth individuals to move restricted technology. The boxes on your plane contained thermal imaging cores for T-90 tank sites, restricted under ITAR, International Traffic in Arms regulations." "And Tiffany?" Vivian asked. She swirled her tea, looking at the steam. "Tiffany Clark," Schroeder sighed. "She claims ignorance, but her bank records show 3 deposits of $10,000 in crypto from a wallet linked to Hayes over the last 6 months. She knew he was moving illicit cargo. She might not have known it was weapons. She claims she thought it was just luxury goods avoiding customs duties. But she was paid to look the other way and manage the loading manifest." So she sold her integrity for 30 grand, Vivian mused. That's cheap. They are both being charged federally, Schroeder said. Conspiracy to violate the Arms Export Control Act, smuggling, and in Hayes's case, arson and attempted kidnapping. The shove on the tarmac also adds a nice assault charge. The DA is throwing the book at them. Good, Vivian said. But the court of law is slow. I want to address the court of public opinion. That afternoon, Vivian released a single statement on her social media channels. It wasn't a press release. It was a photo. The photo showed her wearing the exact same vintage college hoodie she had worn on the tarmac. She was sitting in a different private jet, a Gulfstream G650IR she had chartered, sipping a glass of vintage Krug champagne. The caption read, "Comfort is a luxury. Integrity is a necessity. To the crew that judged the book by its cover, the ending is the best part. See you in court." Hoodie CEO. The post broke the internet again. Sales of hoodies skyrocketed. Hoodie CEO became a rallying cry for everyone who had ever been underestimated or profiled. But for Hayes and Tiffany, the virality was a death sentence. Their faces were everywhere. They weren't just criminals, they were national pariahs. The memes were merciless. The footage of Tiffany crying on the tarmac was remixed into oblivion. They had tried to make Vivian feel invisible. Instead, they had made themselves the most visible villains in America. 6 months later, the Federal District Court in Newark, New Jersey. The courtroom was packed. It wasn't just the press, it was the aviation community. Pilots, flight attendants, and industry CEOs filled the pews. The case of United States versus Hayes and Clark had sent shock waves through the private aviation world. Background checks were stricter now. The Sterling Rule was becoming industry slang for verifying passenger identity before making assumptions. Vivian sat in the front row. She wore a tailored navy suit today, looking every inch the billionaire titan. Beside her sat Julian Cross, the CEO of Apex, who looked like he had aged 10 years. Captain Preston Hayes was brought in first. He looked gaunt. The silver hair that had been perfectly coiffed was now thinning and grey. He wore an orange federal jumpsuit. He refused to look at the gallery. He refused to look at Vivian. Tiffany Clark came in next. She looked terrified. Her makeup was gone, her hair limp. She scanned the room, her eyes locking on Vivian for a split second before she looked down, trembling. The trial had been short. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of the assault, the phone records, the recovered boxes from the partially burned fuselage, and Vivian's testimony. Hayes's defense attorney tried to argue that he had been coerced by the Russian syndicate, that he was a victim of blackmail. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named Ada Reynolds, dismantled that argument in 5 minutes. "Mr. Hayes," Reynolds said, pacing in front of the jury, "you claim you were afraid for your life. Yet, on the tarmac, when confronted by a lone woman in a sweatshirt, you didn't ask for help. You didn't call the police. You assaulted her. You mocked her. You tried to burn her alive to cover your tracks. Are these the actions of a scared man or an arrogant one?" Hayes remained silent. Then came the sentencing. Judge Harrison, a stern man with zero tolerance for nonsense, looked over his glasses at the two defendants. "Ms. Clark," the judge began, "you accepted bribes to bypass security protocols. You facilitated a smuggling ring that endangered national security. And when confronted by the aircraft's owner, you engaged in discriminatory and abusive behavior. You are sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release." Tiffany let out a sob, her legs buckling. Marshals had to hold her up. 5 years. Her life as she knew it was over. No more private jets. No more champagne. "Mr. Hayes," The judge turned his gaze to the pilot. The room went silent. You disgraced your uniform. You betrayed the trust of your passengers. You attempted to smuggle weapons of war. And in a final act of cowardice, you attempted to destroy the evidence and endanger the life of Ms. Sterling. You are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Hayes closed his eyes. 25 years. He would be an old man when, and if, he ever got out. Furthermore, the judge added, you are ordered to pay restitution to Ms. Sterling and her insurance carriers for the total loss of the Bombardier Global 7500. The amount is set at $72 million. A gasp went through the courtroom. It was symbolic. Hayes didn't have that money, but it ensured he would be destitute for the rest of his existence. Every cent he ever earned, every commissary deposit, would be garnished. As the marshals led them away, Hayes passed by the front row. He paused. He looked at Vivian. I didn't know, he rasped, his voice broken. I really didn't know who you were. Vivian stood up. The courtroom quieted to hear her response. That's the problem, Preston, she said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. You just needed to be a decent human being. You failed the test. The marshals shoved him forward. The doors slammed shut. Epilogue. The upgrade. 2 weeks after the sentencing, Vivian stood on the tarmac at a private airfield in California. The sun was shining. She was wearing a hoodie. Ms. Sterling, a pilot walked up to her. He was young, African-American, with a sharp uniform and a warm smile. Captain David Okoro. He had been top of his class at Embry-Riddle. Captain Okoro, Vivian smiled, shaking his hand. Ready to go? Yes, ma'am. We've stocked the galley with that green tea you like, and I double-checked the manifest myself. No surprises. Excellent. She looked past him to the new aircraft sitting on the ramp. It wasn't a Global 7500 this time. It was a Gulfstream G700, the flagship, the newest, fastest, and most luxurious private jet on the planet. The tail was painted a deep, midnight blue. Better security on this one? She asked. Ma'am, Okoro grinned. This bird has a military-grade security suite. Cameras in the hold, biometric locks on the doors, and the crew. Well, we work for you, not the management company. You vetted us yourself. Vivian took a deep breath of the fresh air. She walked up the stairs. This time, no one blocked her path. This time, the flight attendant at the top, a woman named Eleanor, who Vivian had personally hired, handed her a hot towel and smiled genuinely. Welcome aboard, Ms. Sterling. Hoodie looks comfortable. It is, Vivian said, stepping into the cabin that smelled of fresh leather and victory. Let's fly. As the G700 rocketed down the runway and pierced the clouds, leaving the earth far below, Vivian looked out the window. She thought about Hayes and Tiffany, sitting in a concrete cell, wearing jumpsuits that were far less comfortable than her sweats. She took a sip of her tea. Karma hadn't just hit back. It had upgraded her. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book can buy the entire library. Vivian Sterling didn't just fire a rude crew. She dismantled an international smuggling ring and proved that integrity is the ultimate status symbol. Hayes and Tiffany learned the hard way that when you look down on people, you might miss the trap door opening right beneath your feet. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you want more stories like this, where the arrogant get humbled and the underdog takes the win, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. I'm dropping a new story every week, and trust me, You don't want to miss the next one. What would you have done if you were Vivian? Would you have called the cops sooner, or did she play it perfectly? Let me know in the comments below. Stay humble, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next video.